Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Jeremy Seals, and I have the honor of representing Team Caffeine in a presentation regarding Arctic mining consultants and their overall performance in a specific case. Team Caffeine consists of 5 members: Jason Garrett, Isabel Ivy, Jocelyn Kersey, Lindsay Schweitzer, and of course myself, Jeremy Seals. To kick the conversation off, we're going to take a look at an overview of what to expect in our presentation today. First, we're going to introduce the group to Arctic Mining Consultants and discuss what the group is actually responsible for. From there, we're going to analyze exactly what the task was that Arctic Mining Consultants was responsible for in our case study, and then what problems were identified or existed within the organization. From there, we're going to discuss organizational effectiveness. How did the team perform and how did each individual perform? Followed by recommendations. So what our group, Team Caffeine, actually suggests would be opportunities for Arctic mining consultants to improve their organization broadly and teamwork more specifically. Finally, we're going to wrap up with a strong conclusion, and we'll discuss some questions at the end. So let's start with a core question in our case study. What is Arctic Mining Consultants responsible for? And beyond that, who are they? Meaning, who are the individuals that we're going to focus the attention on in our study? To begin with, Arctic Mining Consultants specializes in mineral exploration, including trenching, prospecting, soil sampling, claim staking, line cutting, and grid installation. In terms of the individuals involved, Tom Parker is the project manager who is working with 3 field assistants: John Talbot, Greg Boyce, and Brian Millar. Tom is actually responsible for hiring, training, and supervising the geological field technician. So he has a ton on his plate. John, Greg, and Brian are individuals who come and go. They're not necessarily full-time employees, although in the case of one individual we'll discuss, that individual is a full-time employee. The field assistants are responsible for running marking lines and to cut claim stakes in a narrow time frame. That time frame is roughly 7 days, and we'll discuss what that means from a standpoint of goals in just a moment. So now let's analyze the actual field of work that Arctic Mining Consultants is responsible for. So what we have here is a layout of the plan and specifically what occurred each day or each window of time within the given plan. So upon arriving at the job site, the team agrees to a 7-day plan to complete the task. The day that they arrived was not part of the initial 7-day plan. That was just the arrival date, setting up camp, eating a meal together, and then of course constructing the 7-day plan. The 7-day plan actually consisted of discussing the core responsibilities for each member of the crew. And what it came down to is this: there's a 60-mile radius covering 15 claims. In order to meet the goal, which is to stake the entirety of the claims involved, 7.5 links must be cut each day by each member involved in the team. So that's the goal. As you can see, once day 2 hit, the first delays start to show themselves as half of the team members are failing to keep up with the task at hand. And obviously missing a goal one day only prolongs the amount of work that needs to be done to make up for that work that's missed. So by day 2, already seeing misses in the process. Day 4, Parker and Miller begin to feel isolated and depressed. So you're starting to see individuals depressed and pulling back from what's going on. Day 5, Miller's motivation is completely gone as he continues to miss his goal and get yelled at. Unfortunately, Tom Parker, the team lead, instead of coaching and pulling individuals aside to help support the work that they're struggling with, instead specifically takes out his ire on Miller, and that ends up showing itself, as we'll see in some future slides. The final scheduled day of work and the goal is missed, so the crew misses out on a very important bonus. As the field assistants are not really highly paid individuals, the bonus that comes with work like this means a lot to them. In this case, the bonus was $300 per individual if the goal was met. So now that we've had a chance to take a look at the overall plan, let's talk about each individual involved in executing the plan, starting with the project manager, the team lead, Tom Parker. Again, a lot on Tom's plate. He's responsible for a huge amount, both in the field and away from the field, with the organization that he works for. Some of the key factors to know about Tom: he loves working outside, so he's a big fan of being in the outdoor environment. So the workload for him is actually something he enjoys in terms of the space he gets to work in. He has extensive experience in all non-technical aspects of mineral exploration, which makes him a very valuable commodity to the organization. Unfortunately, he is angered by underperformance of expectations and takes no excuses, meaning he's very rigid by the rules that he lays out. And even for individuals who may struggle with the goals that are laid out, he doesn't give any leeway. And in the harsh conditions that these folks work in, that can be a really challenging thing to come back from. He does not fully understand the need for teamwork, unity, and motivation. And all of those factors really drive some of the missed goals that show up as the project proceeds from day 1 to day 7. All right, the next individual we're going to discuss is John Talbot. He's the first field assistant. Important to note, John is the other full-time employee with Arctic Mining Consultants, and he has massive experience staking claims. Previously, he worked with Tom Parker on claim stake projects. He works hard to meet his quota and tries to help others meet theirs where they can. So unlike Tom, John is actually very committed to his teammates and trying to make sure that everyone is meeting their goal, not just him. Tries to point out faults in management and help resolve issues in a better way. As far as self-actualization needs, he has a need to be noticed, appreciated for his accomplishments, and a need to improve skills and think of new ideas. John is an ideal individual to have in conditions like this particular case because he is somebody that's out for the team, not just for himself as an individual. Our next crew member is Greg Boyce. He is the second field assistant we're going to discuss. He's one of the two who struggled the most to actually meet the goal that was set out at the very beginning of the project. Greg is also an experienced subcontractor who worked for who has in the past worked for Arctic Mining Consultants. He's also previously worked with Tom Parker, so he and Tom have some relationship in the past. And again, also staking mines. So this is something that's not unfamiliar to him. Unfortunately, he's not a big initiative taker. He also seems to avoid reprimand, unlike one of his peers that we'll discuss in a moment. He also avoids taking any blame, meaning that when there is a miss in his part or there's a need for opportunity or need for improvement, he seems to duck or basically dodge those opportunities. He only works as hard as he needs to get by. So he's not putting in the extra effort, extra initiative. He's not helping those around him. He's really just there for the 7 days and then collects his paycheck and goes home. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but from a team standpoint, it's an area of opportunity that Greg has. Greg also has some self-esteem needs. He needs to be necessary or significant among others around him. He has a need for autonomy and independence and a need for mastery over his own environment. The final field assistant we're going to review together is Brian Miller. Brian was also an experienced subcontractor. He has worked for Arctic Mining Consultants previously. He's also previously worked with Tom, claim staking. Brian ends up becoming an individual that receives almost all of the blame for the missed goals that were laid out at the very start of the project. After the first day, Parker actually ends up thinking that there's a possibility that Miller and Boyce are missing or struggling in the work that they're completing. After double checking the work, he finds that there was a miss on both parts. Instead of coaching and or helping, he ends up belittling Brian Miller in particular, and Boyce ends up kind of sliding a bit during that initial interaction. Brian also continually tries his best, but feels it never measures up to Parker's expectations. So unlike Boyce, who seemingly is okay to just get by at the very, very bare minimum, Brian does actually take pride in the work he's doing, but he ends up belittled so frequently that his confidence is shot. He falls into depression and pulls away from the work that he's doing instead of fully putting himself into it. Some self-esteem needs. Need a feeling of competence over one's environment, need of self-worth, and one's ability to live up to expectations and standards. Brian is the type of employee that benefits more from a pat on the back versus a verbal beatdown or assault. And unfortunately, that's exactly what he gets at the hands of Tom. Our next 3 slides will give us an opportunity to look at the actual work completed against the goal that was laid out at the very start of the project plan. So here on this slide, you'll notice that in blue, we have Tom Parker. He was very close to staying on goal basically from day one. And you'll notice at day 7, he ends up upping his overall tally to just north of 10 claims staked. John Talbot is just below John in the orange. Again, very similar work to Tom, excuse me. And so as you can see, his bar stays fairly consistent across the board, right at that 7.5 to 8 marker. And generally speaking, he did quality work throughout from day 1 to day 7. Next, you'll see Greg Boyce and Brian Miller. Greg Boyce and Brian Miller are represented by the gray and the yellow bars here. And you'll notice that they were basically below the 7.5 mean or 7.5 to 8 mean throughout the entire project. You will notice that Brian Miller on day 5 was able to complete his goal, meaning he did hit his goal that day. But unfortunately, even on that day, he failed to receive any pat on the back, any reassurances from Tom that the work he was doing was recognized. And you'll notice there's a big drop off after he hit his goal on day 5. Day 6 and day 7, he significantly misses the mark. And of course, the team as a whole fails. Greg Boyce, as you can see here, consistently is actually below Brian, but unfortunately, that really didn't lead to much coaching either from Tom. Well, I really like the bar graph that we just looked at in the previous slide, looking at each individual's performance. Given that this is a team that's actually asked to complete work, I think that this may actually tell a better story overall against the goal and obviously what was asked of the group. This is the daily goal versus completion in a single space, meaning that the line that's showing in orange is actually the work being done as a team versus the individuals. And I think that that's the key area of focus that we're looking at in a case study like this. So you'll notice really from the start, there's only a couple of days where the team collectively performs at the level of goal. So day 3, you'll notice that there's a meet there. Day 5, they actually increased and exceeded the goal just a bit. And then obviously by day 7, when they were scrambling to make up for lost time, they once again bumped up. I think that the drop off between day 5 and day 6 is heavily based on a failure of Tom's leadership, because that was basically the time frame where Tom melted down, lost it, and failed to support specifically Miller in the way that he needed to be supported. The final graph we're going to take a look at is very similar to the last graph, but it's a little cleaner and a little easier to read. And you can basically see the orange bar represents the completed work. The blue bar is the goal day to day. And as you can see from day 1 to day 7, the 2 bars separate from one another and then in a negative direction. And again, that's reflective of performance that just wasn't up to par. And in this instance, I think reflection of Tom's leadership style and the inability to connect the group as a team performing towards a single goal instead of each individual performing towards a single goal. Now that we've had the opportunity to share some actual overview and obviously introductions to the team and the work that was completed, we've shared some analysis of the failures that took place. We want to look at some solutions that could actually help Arctic Mining Consultants move forward and become a more complete and more team-oriented organization. And certainly with that in mind, hopefully start to meet goals and have individuals who leave work satisfied with the job completed versus beaten down like Miller in particular was with the last process that just was completed. So we're going to start with HR. 2 key areas of focus that could actually allow Arctic Mining Consultants to move forward. The first is to have each one of the individuals that's involved in work complete a pulse survey at the end of the work that's actually done. Not only will it give them a voice in helping to improve functionality and operations, but it will allow leadership to take feedback and actually implement change where necessary. It's likely, given the fact that Tom has been a field supervisor for a long window of time, that without feedback coming in consistently about the work that he's doing, it's difficult for those above him who are not out in the field with him to know exactly where his coaching opportunities lie. The second is to reinvent job postings and descriptions using the MARS model. Basically, what this would mean is including all skill sets needed to complete the task, expected workloads. The job should accurately reflect expectations before arriving on site. This all should take place at the front line, meaning when somebody is hired, they should have a really strong understanding of what the expectation of the work is going to be, what the physical expectations are, the mental expectations, and certainly what the timeframes that they're going to be working on are. The next area of opportunity that our group identified is effective organizational commitment. There are four key areas within this structure that we see as potential opportunities for Arctic mining consultants to move forward and become a more complete organization. The first is to increase justice support through teamwork. What that means is that they should be looking to pair individuals up or work in a more robust structure instead of having individuals who may struggle independently working by themselves in the field. So you can actually take, for instance, two individuals whose skills complement each other and allow them to post or to work each line as a team instead of individually. By doing this, you're actually taking maybe an individual who's incomplete and allowing them to become complete with a complementary partner or teammate. The next area of opportunity is to create a value congruence between organization and employees. When employees value the same thing as their leaders and organization, they will have a higher intrinsic motivation to complete the desired job tasks that they are given within a time frame that they're given. So tie their goals to the organizational goals and then reward them when those goals are actually met. Next is to build trust among employees through team building activities. Not just out in the field, but bring folks together away from work or in windows of time where they actually can start to form some bonds and some trust within one another. One of the big things that hurt Tom and in this case Miller was that there was no trust. And when there's no trust going into a situation that's as stressful as the work that was being done here, it's really difficult to perform at a high level. Finally, increase organizational effectiveness by applying high performance work practices or HPWPs. HPWPs include employee involvement, job autonomy, competency development, and performance and skill-based rewards. HPWPs work best when bundled together. HPWPs improve effectiveness, develop employee skills, knowledge, adapt better to rapidly changing environments, and also include better motivation, attitudes towards employers. So ultimately, there's a lot within that structure that can be improved for Arctic mining consultants. The final area of opportunity that we identified for our case study is employee motivation and engagement. This one is especially obvious as we went through the case study together. The first suggestion that our group has is to increase E to P expectancies. Some examples: through hiring and training of staff, adjusting job duties to skills. An example, of course, is working in teams and splitting tasks based on comfort and skill level. Also, providing sufficient time and resources. An example could be adding an extra half day or day to a job like we discussed in our case study, or adding an extra employee to large jobs and or providing better equipment and quality tools that will actually help complete the task a little bit more efficiently than what we've seen in the study that we went through. Also, provide coaching and behavioral modeling to build self-efficacy. Next, increase outcomes variances. So ensure that rewards are valued, meaning more money, more time off, more recognition, and certainly promotional opportunities that would drive individuals to actually take pride in the work they're doing and want to be better than they were yesterday. Finally, leadership and management training definitely needs to take place. Certainly, Tom is a great indication of an individual who is highly skilled, has a ton of responsibility, but showed very little leadership skills as he was going through this particular process. So set smarter goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-framed, exciting, and certainly reviewed. So there's a lot of opportunities there for Tom to improve. Finally, be aware of signs of job dissatisfaction, the EVLN model. Employees' decisions to exit the company or not return from a job. Why is that happening? Look into those details, understand why those types of things are taking place. Employees, when they voice their concern about work conditions, need to be listened to. Boyce on day 3 said he was slowed down by an unusually thick underbrush in his assigned area. It was ignored. There wasn't any acceptance of the fact that there was something that complicated his job that day. Employees have worked with Parker in the past, so continuing to accept job offers may have been an indication of loyalty. There could have been signs in the past that there was room for organizational growth and improvement, but none were taken, and as a result, in this particular case, a goal was missed. Miller neglected his work towards the end due to excessive stress and lack of recognition, in addition to feeling the task was impossible to complete based on what he had seen through the first 6 days in the field. As we come to our wrap up and review, one of the things I really want to stress is Arctic Mining Consultants works in very challenging conditions that require highly functioning teams. What that means is they're working in isolated conditions, they're working very long hours in those conditions. It's a labor intense role. And ultimately, it requires strong functioning teams to be successful in environments like this. There are 3 areas of organizational opportunities that currently exist with Arctic Mining Consultants. The first is HR. There are a couple of suggestions that were offered through our presentation. The next was effective organizational commitment. Again, multiple suggestions that were offered to help improve the overall function of not only the team, but the organization broadly. Finally, employee motivation and engagement, perhaps the most important area of opportunity that exists today within Arctic Mining Consultants. Finally, by investing in organizational improvements and committing to identifying the right people for the right jobs, Arctic Mining Solutions will meet more goals and become a better performing organization over the long term. So by investing now in improving some of the areas of opportunity, those investments will be felt tenfold on the other end. Team Caffeine would really like to thank everyone for taking part in our study today. And at this time, we'll open the floor to any questions you may have.